Hey guys, tonight we are going to uncover a heartbreaking story about Catherine de Medici, the woman who was orphaned at birth, lost her parents after only a few weeks, and was swept into the ruthless power struggles of the 16th century. From the freezing days in convents to being humiliated by emperors and mobs, she endured pain and shame. Few could imagine, was Catherine truly a merciless tyrant, or simply a tragic woman abandoned by history? Brace yourselves to discover 20 hard-hitting truths that will force you to rethink your assumptions about the Poison Queen. These facts have been distilled from chronicles, ancient manuscripts, and modern research. Incorporating perspectives from numerous history experts, we hope you'll watch all 20 of these revelations to discern which are grounded in reliable sources and which might be mere rumors. Together, we're building a community of history lovers. So if you spot any inaccuracies or wish to contribute your insights, don't hesitate to comment below so we can exchange ideas and enrich the historical narrative. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your local time zone. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Catherine de Medici was born on the 13th of April in the year 1519 at dawn's mist in the radiant city of Florence, Italy, into the most powerful Medici family. Her father, Lorenzo de' Medici, Duke of Urbino, was a fervent patron of the Renaissance who frequented museums and printing workshops. Her mother, Méline de la Tour d'Auvergne, Countess of Bologna, hailed from a noble French lineage. Before Catherine could utter her first cry, her mother had succumbed to postpartum fever, or the plague, and 15 days later her father died of syphilis. The infant girl became an orphan just 1 month after her birth. Like a blossom that withers between two cold tombstones, Catherine's earliest memories were of silent dawns in the convent of Santissima Annunziata, where her aunt Clarice de Medici, the niece of Pope Clement VII, entrusted her to the care of the nuns. From the age of 5, Catherine quietly recited prayers as church bells echoed through the windows, learned to paint classical frescoes on the cloister walls, and observed solemn liturgies. The convent became her only home throughout childhood. Set against the bustling rituals and sweet Renaissance art of Florence, before she turned 9, political storms swept in. The Medici were overthrown in Florence, and Catherine, still a small child, was taken hostage, moved among various convents, and ultimately brought to Rome. During those 3 years of exile, the young girl sometimes longed for the convent walls as a haven, for at least there the bells offered comfort. Far more terrifying were rumors that the opposing faction threatened to strip and abuse the orphaned princess as revenge. Fortuitously, Pope Clement VII ordered Catherine's safe return to Rome, paving the way for her future at the Vatican court. At the age of 14, Catherine de Medici was married to Henry II, then styled Duke of Orleans and the second son of King Francis I of France. By candlelight and the blare of trumpets, the young bride, equipped with a thorough education in history, languages, and philosophy, entered the French court. Though the marriage was a political alliance between France and the Medici, Catherine embraced her new role, mastering royal protocol, understanding statecraft, and opening her heart to French culture. In the harsh years that followed, Catherine bore 10 children, 5 princes and 5 princesses under immense courtly pressure. She endured rumors of witchcraft during her years of infertility, and the astonished gasps when she finally gave birth to her first child at the age of 24. Motherhood's joy was her sole consolation during sleepless nights. As infants' cries echoed throughout the royal nursery, Catherine's influence extended beyond her duties as queen. She sponsored the creation of the Tuileries Garden, a graceful Italian-style park with aligned trees and elegant fountains. She invited the Italian chef Francesco Corte to innovate dishes such as onion, soup, and meat-filled pies, laying the foundation for the famed French haute cuisine. Courtly, music flourished under her patronage, as Italian composers like Saint-Saëns and Derault performed sacred motets to soothe souls amid political turbulence. Politically, Catherine endeavoured to reconcile Catholics and Protestants by issuing a series of edicts protecting the Huguenots. She demonstrated a genuine wish for peace, even though history would also record the dark shadows of the St. Barthélemy massacre and bloody poisoning plots. Nonetheless, her cultural and diplomatic policies helped inaugurate an era of dynastic marriages across Europe, linking the Medici and Valois houses with the Bourbons, Habsburgs, and Spain. Now, as you hear the soft hum of a fan like a lullaby, imagine Catherine de Medici, the orphan child between two tombs, the gentle young bride in a magnificent palace, and ultimately the poison queen reviled by history. 20 horrible facts about her life are about to be revealed, exposing hidden corners few have ever known. If you're still with us, leave a comment saying one, and steel your mind for 20 chilling secrets about her. Terrifying fact. One orphaned at birth and the happiest convent amid chaos, Catherine de Medici, was born on the 13th of April in the year 1519 in the misty dawn at Florence, Italy, where the name Medici was synonymous with power and wealth, yet tragedy struck almost immediately her mother. Countess Méline de la Tour d'Auvergne drew her final breath from postpartum fever, just moments after Catherine's arrival into the world. 15 days later, her father, Lorenzo de' Medici, Duke of Urbino, succumbed to the cruel scourge of syphilis. The infant Catherine, only 1 month old, was suddenly an orphan, like a flower that blooms and withers between two cold graves. This haunting image seared itself into her memory, igniting a lifelong sense of solitude and a deep anxiety over life's fragility from her earliest days. After this devastating loss, her aunt Clarice de' Medici, niece of Pope Clement VII, took Catherine into her care and placed her in the convent of Santissima Annunziata. From the age of 5, Catherine lived beneath its solemn vaults each morning, awakened by the echoing toll of bells. She quietly stepped into the courtyard to pray. Each afternoon she sat in silence, learning to paint classical frescoes on the cloister walls and absorbing the intricate patterns of sacred art. The convent became her entire world, a realm of gentle prayers, warm candlelight, and whispered hymns that soothed her weary spirit. Paradoxically, though she was effectively held hostage by the political turmoil outside, Catherine later described those 3 years in the convent as the happiest time of her life. At least there, she found a measure of peace. Shielded from the bitter power struggles between the Medici and their adversaries, Florence during that period was racked by bloody conflicts and conspiracies. But within the convent's walls, she only heard the steady rhythm of the bells and felt the compassionate presence of her Aunt Clarice. The stark contrast between Catherine's outer reality and inner refuge was profound. Outside lay the violent intrigues of the Florentine court. Inside, a fragile sanctuary where a child could draw comfort from sacred ritual. Though wrapped in the simple habit of a novice, Catherine carried in her heart the terror of abandonment and the resilient spark of survival. As you yawn and let yourself drift into this sleepy narrative, imagine Catherine, her head resting on a cold stone, the convent bells lulling her sorrow. This sorrowful beginning was but the overture to the tumultuous life of the woman who would become the powerful and feared Poison Queen. Terrifying fact 1 is only the opening chapter. Countless darker secrets await in this drowsy journey. Before continuing our dreamlike journey through these mysteries, close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath to feel the echo of Santissima Annunziata. The bells fade away, making room for terrifying fact 2, the plot to strip. Torture and rescue by Pope Clement VII. In the year 1227, when Catherine de' Medici was not yet 9 years old, Florence reeled in the eye of a political storm. The opposition rose like a tempest, overthrowing the Medici family once controllers of the city's treasury and government. Little Catherine, despite her tender age, became a valuable hostage. Her life shuffled through multiple convents, in indefinite confinement, never knowing if tomorrow would be her last day. Whispers that she was a witness to power made every conspiracy target the orphaned princess. But the cruelty did not end there. When Emperor Charles V's forces besieged Florence at the behest of Pope Clement VII, humanity's brutality was laid bare. The rebels not only sought to depose the Medici, but hungered for personal vengeance. They called to strip the orphaned princess naked, torture her in the public square to humiliate Medici's legacy, even behead the child to intimidate the ruling house. The image of a pale, trembling child before the blade, and the soldier's uncaring hands chills all who hear the tale. Yet amid death's shadow and terror, a miracle revealed the last gleam of Catherine's childhood. In the year 30, not fully completed, Pope Clement VII, her powerful uncle, intervened. By urgent decree, he dispatched troops to escort Catherine from Florence and bring her safely to Rome. The Vatican Palace, once a distant fable of grandeur, suddenly became home to the orphaned girl. She passed through its halls, leaving behind the ruins and gloom of a war-torn city. Within the Vatican's candlelit chambers and cold stone colonnades, Catherine relearned the rituals of courtly ceremony, listened to sacred chant, and witnessed solemn councils. Under Rome's quiet sky, she first understood that power creates opulent scenes, but also conceals untold plots. The tug-of-war between light and darkness, faith and political maneuvering, forged in her the resilience to become the future queen. The near-execution experience and the humiliation of being stripped before a crowd, though she escaped, etched a priceless lesson into Catherine's heart. Only intellect and patience could ensure survival in the whirlwind of power. That ultimate shame, instead of crushing her spirit, became the fuel for her fierce will to endure. When she recalled those days, Catherine's voice, weak but resolute, echoed like a lullaby. In the night I will never let myself become a pawn of fate. From the moment of her rescue, she began to study diplomacy, intrigue, and the art of manipulating words. Three precious qualities: patience, vigilance, and the will to survive were born in the mire of her suffering. Before moving into the next chapter of this drowsy night, let the echoes of the Vatican fade away, drawing you into terrifying fact. 3 married at 14 to Henry II and the first decade of infertility. In the year 1533, when Catherine de Medici was only 14 years old, she was wed to Henry II, then styled Duke of Orleans, and the second son of King Francis I and Queen Claude. The wedding was a magnificent display of candles and trumpets, symbolizing the political alliance between the French crown and the powerful Medici family. Yet the glittering curtain fell quickly, revealing a crushing burden beneath. For the first 10 years of her marriage, Catherine remained unable to conceive an heir. When her elder brother-in-law, Francis II, died in the year 1536, Henry II suddenly became the Dauphin, placing the supreme responsibility of continuing the Valois line squarely on Catherine's shoulders. In the French court, infertility was considered a grave offence. People began to avoid Catherine, calling her the ordinary princess, even accusing her of witchcraft for failing to fulfill her duty. Childless, Catherine's future became uncertain. She could face divorce, to be expelled back to Italy, or simply lose her rightful status as queen. Her stepmother in Rome lacked the power to intervene. Political allies in Paris wavered between trust and suspicion, and the populace whispered cruel rumours. Catherine wandered the vast palace in silent humiliation and unseen fear, like a traveller without a destination, seeking any way to reverse her fate. Each morning, she awoke with fragile hope, only to sink into despair when menstruation did not come. Each afternoon, she watched silent court ladies laughing and listened to whispers of newborn princes echoing through the corridors. Catherine understood that she bore not only her family's legacy, but also that of an entire kingdom. Though her figure was slender, her soul was stretched taut like a violin string, waiting for a miracle. When the Duke of Orleans approached her at the evening feast, there was no royal splendor in his steps, only uneasy hesitation. Before the assembled ministers and guests, Catherine forced a strong smile, masking her pain. The crown upon her head felt as light as mist, yet its weight pressed down harder than any weapon. At night, she lay in her sumptuous bedchamber, tears tracing paths on the silk pillow. The toll of prayer bells and whispered devotions became her constant companions. Catherine summoned herbalists, alchemists, and healers, experimenting with every remedy the court would permit. Commoners spread rumors that she knelt before charms, burned incense, and prayed for a rebirth of fertility, further cementing the whisper that she was the orphaned witch. Yet within Catherine's heart remained a flicker of defiance. She knew that only willpower and strategy could rescue her from the mire of infertility. That profound humiliation failed to extinguish her desire to become a mother, her yearning to prove her worth. Each night's sleep brought a tug at her spirit. Each dream showed children laughing beneath sunny skies, urging her not to surrender. Before the memory of sleepless nights and tender hopes fades away, let the whisper of royal intrigue gently carry you into terrifying fact 4 superstitious remedies: drinking mule urine, cow dung, and the Black Queen epithet. In the grip of despair, Catherine de Medici turned to the most bizarre remedies her era could offer. She consumed mule urine drawn from an animal, notoriously believed to be incapable of fertility, in the hope that its infertile essence might somehow reverse her own barren fate. She anointed herself with cow dung, smearing the foul substance across her skin in a ritual meant to draw vitality inward. She had crushed stag's antlers, mixed into pastes applied to her body. On more than one occasion, she summoned alchemists and folk healers into the private chambers of her apartments, insisting on arcane ceremonies to invoke hidden powers. Once, overcome by the pungent fumes of a concoction they called life elixir, she fainted mid-ceremony, sending courtiers into a panic and fueling endless gossip through the palace halls. These acts of desperation only stoked the flames of courtly rumour. In a time when female infertility was equated with a malevolent force opposed to life itself, Catherine's forays into the occult were seized upon by her enemies. Whispers spread that she had struck pacts with dark spirits, that she was a binder of life, holding sway over health and death by unnatural means. The nickname Black Queen took hold an epithet, suggesting that her power sprang from shadowy arts rather than lawful authority. Portraits circulated in sketchy manuscripts showed her garbed in somber tones, hands raised in mysterious gestures, eyes alight with uncanny purpose. The image of a sovereign employing such bizarre measures became entrenched in popular imagination, forging a psychological armour around Catherine that was as much made of fear as of respect. Yet through this veil of scandal, Catherine maintained a calm exterior. Behind closed doors, she quietly catalogued these attempts, marking dates and outcomes in the margins of her private journals. Each failure deepened her resolve. Each new remedy, a testament to her unyielding will. She reasoned that logic and science alone had not unlocked her body's hidden potential. Therefore, she might as well explore every avenue, however strange, until she found relief. Meanwhile, the label Black Queen transcended mere insult. It became a form of protection. Once people believed she commanded dread powers, they thought twice before crossing her. The very rumours of witchcraft, bred from her own experiments, supplied her with a potent deterrent. No diplomat dared scheme against her openly, fearing supernatural retribution as much as political fallout. As you drift further into this drowsy narrative, imagine Catherine cloaked in candlelight, lips pressed around a crude cup of mule urine, her heart pounding with nervous hope. Picture her tracing the runes of alchemical symbols onto her boudoir walls, praying for a miracle, the air thick with incense, and unease. Even the stalwart walls of Fontainebleau seemed to listen with bated breath. Before the shadows of superstition finally receded, let the hush of midnight wrap around you as we move into terrifying Fact 5, the discovery of infertility's cause. Dr. Rhyme. Jean Fernal and the miracle named Prince Francis, in the gloom following 10 years of fruitless hope. Catherine's restless spirit turned to science rather than sorcery. At the behest of King Francis I, who had grown weary of gossip and intrigue, Dr. Jean Fernel, the court physician renowned for his disdain of superstition and his meticulous analytical mind, was summoned to investigate the royal couple's infertility. Fernal approached Henry II and Catherine with a surgeon's precision and a scholar's curiosity. He noted that Henry moved with a peculiar stiffness, that the blood in his veins seemed oddly sluggish. Through careful examination, Fernel uncovered a congenital defect in Henry's anatomy, a subtle malformation that made the act of union difficult if not impossible. Rather than prescribe potions or resort to dangerous procedures, Fernal advocated an entirely different remedy, a change in the mechanics of intimacy. He instructed the young couple in a series of precise postures, angles, and rhythms designed to mitigate Henry's physical limitation. Each position was laid out in careful detail, as though one were following a delicate choreography. Catherine, exhausted by years of alchemical concoctions and whispered insults of witchcraft, approached the physician's counsel with wary optimism. Henry, too, found himself compelled by the logic of this scientific intervention. Night after night, in the private chambers of Fontainebleau, Catherine and Henry embarked on Fernal's regimen. The flicker of candlelight cast long shadows on the tapestry, and the soft rustle of silk became the soundtrack to their experimentation. At first, the exercises were awkward, laced with embarrassment and lingering doubt. Catherine's slender form pressed against Henry with a mix of hope and apprehension, while Henry strove to master each prescribed movement despite the discomfort of his condition. Courtiers whispered that the Queen's boudoir was the setting for a new kind of ritual, one rooted not in magic but in the cold precision of medical science. Then, on the 19th of January, in the year 1544, after countless trials and tremors of anticipation, Catherine gave birth to a son, christened Francis. The newborn's cry rang through the palace halls like a trumpet call, announcing a miracle. That first, piercing wail erased a decade of scorn and pity. The air itself seemed to sigh in relief as the infant prince's healthy lungs filled with breath, daisies and lilies, once symbols of fertility in Medici heraldry, took on new significance. They heralded the dawn of Catherine's triumph over fate. From that moment on, Catherine bore 9 more children, with 5 sons surviving to safeguard the Valois lineage. The throne, once teetering on the brink of abandonment, now stood firm. Each successive birth reaffirmed Catherine's place in history, no longer the ordinary princess or the Black Queen of whispered rumour, but the mother of kings whose very lives owed their existence to a doctor's insight rather than a sorcerer's spell. As you drift further into this sleepy tale, imagine the hush that fell over the royal nursery when little Francis first opened his eyes. Picture Catherine, pale yet radiant, cradling her son, while the court rejoiced in hushed awe. The miracle did not shimmer with magical dust, but glowed with the quiet power of knowledge and compassion. Before the echoes of infant cries and miraculous cures fully fade, settle deeper into your pillow's embrace as we unveil terrifying Fact 6 humiliation at court and the Nostradamus connection. When Henry II, Catherine's husband, openly flaunted his affection for Diane de Poitiers, the woman 19 years his senior, Catherine was cast into a pit of public shame. Diane was granted the second throne, adorned with precious rings and the Château de Tournelle estates Catherine might have claimed by right. The court whispered that Diane wielded more influence than the Queen herself, while Catherine was reduced to nothing more than a birthing machine, tasked with securing the Valois succession. Every jousting tournament became a stage for Catherine's anguish. Henry would embrace Diane mid-contest, his arms encircling the mistress beneath the glow of torches. and foreign ambassadors dutifully recorded the spectacle for posterity. Yet, in a bitter twist, it was Diane de Poitiers herself who urged Henry to spend time with Catherine, believing that the king's attentions might finally grant the queen the offspring she so desperately needed. This astonishing contradiction deepened Catherine's humiliation. The very rival who displaced her in public affection had become the midwife to her dynastic hopes. Imagine the cruel irony to be scorned yet entrusted with the future of the realm's bloodline. Amid this maelstrom of courtly embarrassment, rumours began to swirl that Catherine's infertility and subsequent childbearing exploits were tied to sorcery. In that superstitious age, a woman who bore no children was all too easily branded a witch, someone in league with dark forces that opposed the cycle of life. And so the epithet Black Queen grew more potent, suggesting that Catherine's power derived not from royal decree, but from perverse pacts with the occult. Central to these whispers was Catherine's connection to Michel de Nostradamus, better known as Nostradamus, the famed seer and astrologer. She invited him to the opulent galleries of the Tuileries to cast horoscopes for her children, seeking signs of health and longevity. His quatrains, cryptic and haunting, foretold the fate of the Valois line, including that chilling verse of a young lion overcoming the old on the field of combat, later interpreted as predicting Henry's fatal joust. The presence of Nostradamus in her court, once a symbol of enlightenment, was perverted into evidence of Catherine's dabbling in forbidden arts. Adding fuel to the fire were rumours of the so-called Riri brothers, shadowy figures said to perform necromantic rituals among the Tuileries statues at midnight. Supposedly, candles burnt blue in their presence, and the palace walls carried echoing chants in unknown tongues. For courtiers and commoners alike, the Tuileries became a haunted realm, where the Black Queen summoned unseen forces to shield her throne. This fusion of public disgrace and occult association painted Catherine as a figure of both pity and dread. On one hand, she was a queen reduced by her husband's infidelity to the margins of power. On the other, she was alleged to be a puppeteer commanding supernatural legions. The resulting image of a sovereign swathed in grief and sorcery circulated throughout Europe, cementing her reputation as a ruler who blended royal ceremony with dark mystery. Now, as your eyelids grow heavier and the world outside slips into silence, imagine Catherine alone in her chamber, the pale light of a single candle dancing on her face, her eyes reflecting sorrow and determination in equal measure. A court of laughter and whispering shadows awaits beyond her door, but within, she is the last sovereign of her own hidden realm. As the grim echoes of prophecy and humiliation fade into the distance, let your breathing slow and prepare as we descend into terrifying Fact 7, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre and the Poisoned Gloves Conspiracy. On the 23rd of August in the year 1572, just 2 days after the attempted assassination of the Huguenot leader Admiral Gaspard de Coligny Paris, erupted in bloodshed known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. In a wave of fanatical violence, Catholic mobs stormed into churches and private homes, upended altars, and slaughtered Protestants mercilessly. From infants in their cradles to the frail and elderly, no one was spared. By the time the carnage subsided 2 days later, more than 3,000 victims lay dead in Paris alone, and the total toll across the kingdom climbed into the tens of thousands. Soon after, Catherine de Medici, already branded the Black Queen, found herself accused of masterminding this atrocity. Spanish ambassadors circulated accounts claiming that she had stood on the balcony of the Tuileries Palace, her lips curved in a cold, triumphant smile as the bodies were hauled into the River Seine. That haunting image of a sovereign laughing amidst rivers of blood etched itself indelibly into the collective imagination of Europe, cementing her reputation for ruthless cruelty. Yet even this horror was followed by another sinister tale, the Poisoned Gloves Conspiracy. In the days leading up to the marriage of Catherine's daughter Margaret to Henry of Navarre, a union intended to unite warring faiths, the Queen of Navarre, Jeanne d'Albret, suddenly fell ill and died after putting on a newly purchased pair of gloves sent from Paris. Rumours immediately swirled that Catherine had ordered the gloves to be laced with a slow-acting toxin, designed to strike at the heart of the Protestant movement, even as her own daughter celebrated its reconciliation. Although no concrete evidence ever surfaced to prove Catherine's direct involvement, the poisoned gloves became an enduring symbol of her willingness to employ any means, however underhanded, to maintain her grip on power. Artists and writers of the time depicted the gloves dripping with venom in macabre engravings, while street-side pamphlets warned every noble and merchant that no gesture of goodwill could be trusted in Catherine's domain. That subtle accessory, a token of supposed goodwill, transformed into a potent emblem of treachery. Imagine, if you dare, the hush of a bridal chamber, the bride slipping her hands into what she believed to be a gift of celebration, only to feel the slow burn of betrayal pulse through her veins. The palace corridors would have resonated with hushed panic, as courtiers whispered of foul play and plotted their next moves in terror. Meanwhile, Catherine, ever the consummate strategist, might have counted on the cloak of darkness to conceal her role. As you drift deeper into the drowsy realms of your slumbering mind, picture the moonlight glinting off those fateful gloves lying abandoned on the bridal dais, their silk now stained with a wicked rumour. The story of the poisoned gloves, though unproven, highlights the lengths to which Catherine would go, weaponizing intimacy and trust as deftly as any blade. Before the bitter echoes of betrayal and bloodshed fully subside, let the hush of your room deepen as we uncover terrifying fact 8: punishing her daughter and the flying squadron of spies. Not content with punishing political rivals, Catherine de Medici turned her ruthless eye even on her own flesh and blood. When her daughter Margaret, Princess of Valois, was discovered consorting with Dolpelet, a Protestant noble, Catherine gave swift and secret orders. Dolpelet was seized within the very walls of the palace, escorted through shadowed corridors, and executed quietly, his fate concealed from the public eye. Margaret, her tears unheard, was stripped of her titles and rights as heir. She was exiled to the remote fortress of Écouen, granted only a meagre allowance sufficient for survival, if barely so. This merciless act laid bare Catherine's steely resolve. She would sacrifice maternal bonds without hesitation to safeguard the honour and stability of the Valois dynasty. In that same spirit of relentless control, Catherine devised a more subtle, yet equally formidable weapon, la bande volante, the flying squadron. She handpicked scores of women from across Europe, beauties trained in the art of conversation, seduction, and subterfuge. These enchanting operatives mingled at grand balls, whispered secrets into powerful ears, and slipped away with knowledge that would be delivered directly into Catherine's waiting hands. In candlelit salons and gilded antechambers, these spies drifted like ghosts of elegance, their laughter masking the steel of their loyalty to the Queen. No plot remained hidden from Catherine's far-reaching network. Imagine a sumptuous feast where courtiers unwrap delicate morsels and toast to the health of the realm, unaware that each stolen glance, each flirtatious smile, could become intelligence. A suitor leaning in to catch a jewel's sparkle might instead find himself recounting strategies meant for private councils. Catherine's flying squadron transformed the palace into a web of illusions, ensuring that any dissent, any whispered conspiracy, could be intercepted before it matured into open rebellion. This duality of punishment and espionage, fathering fear through the brutal treatment of her daughter while nurturing an ethereal circle of spies, illustrates the darkness at the heart of Catherine's governance. She showed that power need not always be wielded with a clanging sword. Sometimes it was enough to carve an empire with a silken glove and a cold decree. As your eyelids grow heavy, picture Margaret Valois, cloaked in sorrowful exile, pacing the lonely battlements of Écouen, her mother's instructions echoing in her ears. Then shift your gaze to a masked ball in Paris, a whisper here, a stolen document there, and the flying squadron gathers their delicate spoils of secrets. The palace walls themselves seem to lean in, murmuring Catherine's triumph in mastering both punishment and the subtle art of intelligence. With terrifying fact 8 now revealed, the portrait of Catherine de Medici becomes ever more chilling, a mother who would forsake her own daughter, and a queen who spun a network of seduction and surveillance to uphold her reign. Allow this somber reflection to guide your journey deeper into slumber, where the shadows of courtly intrigue and maternal sacrifice blend into a tapestry of regret and resolve. Before the last echoes of silken whispers fade, allow the stillness of this twilight hour to guide you gently toward terrifying fact 9, Machiavelli's book and the policy of reconcile, then repress. When Catherine de Medici first arrived in France from Italy, she carried always under her arm a treasured gift, Niccolò Machiavelli's Il Principe, a book once presented to her father. By the soft glow of candlelight, she pored over each passage, absorbing the art of seizing power through guile, the doctrine of befriend. In order to dominate, time and again, she deployed sudden purges that left her opponents aghast. Vanquished by unseen blades of political intrigue, yet Catherine did not rely on ruthless cunning alone. In the year 1562, she issued the Edict of Saint-Germain, a gesture of hope and conciliation. Under its provisions, Huguenots were granted freedom to worship in certain towns and to hold public office. The Queen Mother convened gentle dialogues between Catholic and Protestant leaders, urging them to embrace peace as our guiding star. For a fleeting moment, the courtyards of Fontainebleau rang with prayers from both camps, and the dream of unity stirred the hearts of many. But the shadow of St. Bartholomew's Day massacre loomed large, and the delicate tapestry of reconciliation unravelled. In the weeks that followed the carnage, Catherine found herself compelled to reverse course. With a heavy hand, she resurrected edicts, forbidding Protestant worship, ordering the removal of Huguenot preachers, and commissioning armed patrols to root out heresy. The very instruments of reconciliation, edicts and councils were refashioned into tools of suppression. This abrupt turnaround stung both sides. Hardline Catholics accused Catherine of weakness for ever tolerating the heretical scourge. Protestant communities felt betrayed, their fragile trust shattered like glass. Neither faction extended her enduring support. The policy of reconcile, then repress, became a bitter lesson in political alchemy. Mix too many ingredients, and the potion curdles. Imagine the hush of a council chamber as Catherine presented her revised edict, the quill sliding across parchment with a resigned click. In the pews of a newly closed Huguenot chapel, families wept quietly as the preacher was led away. The same hands that once shook in fellowship now wielded swords and swordsmen, and yet this very paradox of offering olive branches before drawing the sabre reveals Catherine's mercurial mastery of power. She understood that hope could be a weapon to disarm, while fear could be wielded to assert dominance once the moment was ripe. By first promising tolerance, she lulled both allies and adversaries into complacency. Then, by enforcing repression, she reaffirmed the absolute authority of the crown. As your eyes grow heavier and your breaths deepen, picture Catherine at her desk, the Machiavelli tome open before her, its worn pages marked with her careful annotations. She reads a passage on the virtues of flexibility in governance, nods slowly, and drafts her next decree. The palace walls, thick with the memory of peace and bloodshed alike, seem to lean in as she pronounces yet another twist of policy. Terrifying fact 9 thus closes on this haunting cycle of appeasement followed by oppression. In the drowsy half-light of your own reverie, sense the weight of Catherine's legacy, a sovereign who used both friendship and fear as tools, and in doing so, cast France into 3 decades of religious war. Let this lulling revelation guide you further into the corridors of history's most somber dreams. Before the final echoes of conflict fade completely, let the weight of 3 decades of religious war settle softly in your mind as we arrive at terrifying fact 10, the decline of the Valois and a conflicted cultural legacy. After the audacious plot against the Duke of Guise and the tragic death of King Henry III in the year 1573, the Valois dynasty, once glorious and unshakable, came to its end. Catherine de Medici, who had served as queen consort and then queen mother, witnessed the crown her family had nurtured slip away into history. In the aftermath, she withdrew to the Tuileries Palace, where she lived in quiet seclusion. The grand tapestry of her political achievements lay in tatters, and the wounds of intrigue and betrayal would never fully heal. Yet, in this twilight of her influence, Catherine's cultural legacy shone with an unexpected brilliance. She had transformed the Tuileries Gardens into an Italianate haven rows of perfectly aligned plane trees, elegant fountains that whispered in the breeze, and ornate parterres shaped into intricate patterns. The garden paths became a sanctuary for reflection and solitude, even as they bore silent witness to a queen's final years. Inside the palace, the courts Catherine once hosted now hummed with the music she loved. The Italian composers Luca Maurizio and Philippe de Monte had given way to the French choral masterpieces of Antoine de Saint-Saëns and Cipriano de Rore. Their sumptuous motets and madrigals filled the halls with ethereal harmonies that lulled courtiers into reverie. Catherine's patronage had ensured that France's musical heritage blossomed, even as its political unity crumbled. In the palace kitchens, the artistry of chef Francesco Corte endures as another testament to Catherine's vision. He introduced the delicate onion soup and refined pâtés, establishing a gastronomic style that would evolve into the haute cuisine for which France became famous. Each dish served at Catherine's table was a celebration of flavour and finesse, a reminder that a court can uplift the senses, even in the shadow of turmoil. As a mother, Catherine's devotion never waned. Even when her children reigned and fell by turns, she commissioned poems and paintings in their honour, ensuring that her son Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III would be remembered not only for their crowns, but also for their patronage of the arts. The royal library she amassed contained rare manuscripts on philosophy, medicine, and astronomy, preserving knowledge that would guide scholars for centuries. This paradox of Catherine's life of ruthless political schemes, coexisting with a vibrant cultural renaissance, casts her in a conflicted light. On the one hand, she was vilified as the architect of massacres and the Black Queen who wielded fear like a scepter. On the other, she was revered as a mother of the arts, a guardian of gardens and gastronomy, a composer of peace through music and beauty. Her identity remains a tapestry of contrasts, each thread pulling in a different direction. Imagine now, as your eyelids grow heavy, the soft rustle of leaves in the Tuileries at dusk, the distant echo of a courtly dance in Catherine's private chambers, and the gentle clink of silverware in a grand banquet hall. This is the legacy she bequeathed a world of contradictions where cruelty and compassion, destruction and creation, walked hand in hand. Terrifying Fact 10. Thus concludes our exploration of Catherine de Medici's extraordinary life. In the quiet hush that follows, consider this final reflection. A ruler's power may fall, her lineage may fade, yet the beauty she cultivated, whether in gardens, music, or cuisine, lingers on as a testament to her enduring, albeit conflicted, spirit. May this sombre lullaby carry you into the deepest reaches of sleep, where history's echoes and the fragrances of an Italian garden entwine in your dreams, before the last echoes of gardens and grand banquets fade entirely. Let your thoughts drift as we begin terrifying Fact 11, becoming the Black Witch through superstition. Following a decade of fruitless hope, Catherine de Medici turned to the most bizarre cures imaginable to break her supposed curse of barrenness. She drank mule urine, a creature long believed infertile in the belief that its sterile essence might unlock her own dormant fertility. She smeared fresh cow dung over her skin, hoping that the earth's raw vitality would seep inward. She had stag's antlers ground into a paste and applied hot against her flesh. At her bidding, alchemists and folk healers filled her private chambers with pungent fumes. Performing arcane rites by candlelight, on more than one occasion, The queen herself collapsed mid-rite, her body overwhelmed by the maddening stench and acrid smoke, prompting court physicians to rush in, only to find their sovereign at the mercy of these wild concoctions. In an age when witch hunts stalked Europe's countryside, Catherine's desperate measures fanned the flames of rumour and fear. Infertile women were often branded as life's destroyers, accused of consorting with dark forces to upset nature's course. Soon, court gossip and missives sent to both Paris and Rome spread the legend of the Black Queen who wielded forbidden magic. No longer merely a powerful sovereign, Catherine became the subject of whispered accusations that she had struck bargains with demons, that her right hand summoned shadows, that her throne was built upon unholy rites. To the common folk, she was no longer the grieving mother striving for an heir, but the dreaded Black Witch, lurking behind the ornate tapestry of courtly life. Yet this tale of dark sorcery masks a deeper sorrow. Catherine's turn towards superstition was born of anguish and despair, the wrenching conflict of duty versus bodily betrayal. Night after night, she lay awake in her opulent bedchamber, haunted by the chime of distant bells and the emptiness of silence. Each dawn found her shivering in her ornate gowns, determined to try the next remedy. The stigma of failure settled like a cloak on her shoulders. In that quiet misery, rumours of witchcraft offered a twisted kind of relief, better to be feared than pitied. However, these very trials tempered Catherine's resolve and steeled her mind. She resolved in her heart that reason, not superstition, must prevail. Secretly, she studied medicine, consulting reputable physicians and dissecting medical texts in the dim light of her private library. She distanced herself from the wildest of folk remedies and focused on the emerging science of physiology. Gradually, she replaced cow dung and antler pastes with poultices of carefully measured herbs, learned the importance of diet and hygiene, and adopted the counsel of learned men rather than charlatans. As you drift deeper into the hush of this midnight reflection, imagine Catherine alone at her escritoire, quill in hand, a leather-bound medical treatise open before her, the last embers of once fetid candles guttering on the desk. The legend of the Black Witch would endure, whispered by terrified courtiers for generations. Yet beneath that fearsome myth lay the story of a woman who chose logic over legend, who turned her back on shadowy rituals to embrace the clear light of knowledge. Terrifying fact 11 thus closes on this paradox. Catherine de Medici, once condemned as the darkest of witches, quietly laid the foundations for her own redemption from superstition to science. May this softly spoken truth lull you further into sleep, where dreams weave together both the darkness of rumour and the quiet strength of reason. Before the last embers of reason flicker out entirely, let a gentle hush settle over your thoughts as we unveil terrifying fact 12, entertaining Nostradamus, horoscopes and the shadows of the future. In the wake of rumours that she dabbled in dark arts, Catherine de Medici refused to let the whispers of witchcraft obscure her political ambitions. Instead, she turned to Michel de Nostradamus, better known across Europe as Nostradamus, celebrated astrologer, seer, and prophet, summoned to the Tuileries Palace. Nostradamus was asked to chart the celestial charts and craft horoscopes for Catherine's children. Peering into the hidden destinies of the Valois line, by candlelight in the Queen's private study, Nostradamus unfurled his parchments, revealing dozens of cryptic quatrains. One such verse foretold that the young lion shall overcome the old upon the field of combat, his golden eyes shall be pierced. A chilling allusion to the fateful jousting tournament that would claim King Henry II's life. Catherine, seated quietly at his elbow, watched the prophet's gnarled finger trace each line, making careful notes by the pale glow of her candle. The air grew thick with anticipation, the palace walls seeming to listen as if alive. Once these horoscopes were sealed and distributed, they spread like wildfire through the courts of France. Courtiers whispered of Catherine's uncanny insight, that she could read the stars as if they were open books, Torher detractors. These prophecies confirmed the darkest suspicions. She was a mistress of forbidden knowledge, weaving fate itself to suit her designs. Yet to Catherine, Nostradamus was far more than an oracle. He was a strategic instrument, a psychological weapon. Each time a new quatrain was revealed, her opponents trembled with uncertainty. Would the next verse herald defeat, betrayal, death? In the fog of indecision, Catherine's power only grew. She understood that fear, especially fear of the unknown, was as potent as any sword or decree. By harnessing the mystique of prophecy, she extended her influence beyond the here and now, shaping the perceptions of nobles and peasants alike. Still, behind the aura of celestial mastery lay the lonely memory of a little girl orphaned and alone, clutching at any sign that fate might shine favorably upon her. For Catherine, consulting Nostradamus was more than a political gambit. It was a quest for meaning in a life marked by tragedy. The stars offered her solace, a glimpse of order in a world of brutality and betrayal. Imagine now the hush of the Queen's private chambers as Nostradamus's voice rose and fell in measured tones. Each syllable, an incantation of destiny. Picture Catherine's steady hand, penning annotations, cross-referencing ancient texts, as the fragile parchment trembled in her grasp. Outside the room, ministers paused in mid-step, wary of venturing into the realm of prophecy. Even the most hardened warrior hesitated, wondering if the stars themselves opposed his cause. Terrifying Fact 12 thus reveals a portrait of Catherine de Medici as a sovereign who wielded both steel and scripture, commanding armies with one hand and the heavens with the other. As your breathing deepens and the world around you recedes, let this revelation drift through your dreams. A queen who charted her course by candlelight and starlight, forging power not only from politics, but from the dark poetry of prophecy. May the silent rhythm of her story guide you into sleep's embrace, where the lines between fate and desire blur into the soft lull of night. As the distant echoes of prophecy and espionage begin to fade, settle further into your pillows, and let us unveil terrifying Fact 13, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, a laughter amid a sea of blood. On the 23rd and 24th of August in the year 1572, Paris was engulfed in a tide of blood known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Merely 2 days after the attempted assassination of Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the Huguenot leader, fanatical Catholic mobs surged through the city. They stormed churches, overturned altars, and butchered Protestant men, women, and children without mercy. Bodies were hurled into the River Seine, their lifeless forms bobbing downstream, while others were suspended from the city's bridges, a gruesome testament to vengeance unbound. According to Spanish ambassador's dispatches, Catherine de Medici stood on the balcony of the Tuileries Palace, her gaze unflinching, her lips curled in a faint, triumphant chuckle as the carnage unfolded below. That chilling sound, her cold laughter echoing through the chaos, cemented her reputation as the driving force, the midwife of genocide. Though no direct proof ever tied Catherine's hand to the massacre's planning, the image of a queen amused by such horror became stamped indelibly upon Europe's memory. This horrific event starkly illuminated the conflict between Catherine's earlier gestures of reconciliation and the reality of brutal violence. Not long before, she had issued the Edict of Saint-Germain in 1562, permitting Huguenots limited freedom of worship and seeking peaceful coexistence. Yet when the massacre erupted, she fell silent, or was perceived to have sanctioned the slaughter. The haunting spectre of her laughter amidst the gore underscored the terrible price of absolute power, the lullaby of peace that once soothed France's wounds, instantly transformed into the dirge of its most gruesome tragedy. Today, the legend of Catherine's laughter on that bloody night remains the ultimate symbol of religious betrayal and unchecked ambition. Scholars still debate whether she orchestrated the massacre or merely stood helpless as the mob's fury engulfed Paris. Regardless of her true culpability, that cruel laugh reverberates through history, a reminder that even a queen's gentle smile can twist into something monstrous when power is left unchecked. So, as your eyelids grow heavy and your mind drifts towards slumber, imagine the stillness before dawn, broken by the tormented cries of a city in flames. Envision Catherine's silhouette against the palace's ornate balcony. Her expression unreadable. Then the sharp, unexpected sound of her laugh slicing through the morning mist. It is a moment of pure dread that lulls you even as it unsettles your dreams. Terrifying fact 13 thus stands as a sobering reflection on the darkest depths of human cruelty and the ambiguous role of power in unleashing it. As you drift into the quiet embrace of sleep, let the memory of that laughter mix with your own. A whispered question in your ear, in the end. Is power ever too potent, even for a sovereign to control? Drifting from the dark laughter of St. Bartholomew's Day, let the distant thunder of hooves and the hush of midnight guide you softly into terrifying fact 14, the poisoned gloves conspiracy, the deadly pair of gloves. Not long after the massacre, whispers of a more intimate betrayal began to swirl in the gilded corridors of the royal court. On the eve of her daughter Margaret's marriage to Henry of Navarre, Catherine de Medici sent a gift to Princess Jeanne d'Albret, Margaret's future mother-in-law, a pair of exquisite gloves, custom-fitted and embroidered with the royal crest. Jeanne, delighted by this sign of goodwill, slipped her hands into the velvet-lined leather as she prepared for the festivities. But within hours, she was overcome by a mysterious illness. Her hands grew numb, her skin blistered, and her breath became shallow. By night's end, the proud queen lay dead in her bedchamber, her final moments lost to fever and poison. In the absence of a formal inquest or autopsy, no forensic proof ever surfaced to confirm what everyone feared, that Catherine had ordered the gloves to be laced with a slow-acting toxin, a cruel instrument designed to extinguish Jeanne's life and weaken the Huguenot cause from within the family itself. The gloves became grim objects of fascination, evidence of Catherine's cunning. Artists of the time sketched print after print, a pair of blood-stained gloves resting on a darkened table, while a shadowy figure looked on with a knowing smile. Pamphlets circulated in Paris and beyond, warning that no gift, however innocent, could be trusted in the Queen's domain. This unnerving conspiracy solidified Catherine's reputation as the Poison Queen. Where swords and cannons once served her will, she now wielded silent toxins and whispered plots. In an era when a single prick from a needle could herald the end of a life, the idea that a simple accessory could carry death was more terrifying than any open battle. Court physicians, constrained by royal decree, dared not speak out. Commoners spoke of avoiding all tokens from the Tuileries, fearful that a silken glove might hide a lethal secret. Yet the legend of the poisoned gloves reveals more than just murder. It exposes Catherine's willingness to employ the subtlest of weapons, the weapon of trust betrayed. The gloves, meant to honour and unite, instead delivered a fatal blow to an alliance and sent ripples of mistrust through the highest ranks of French nobility. No one could be certain who stood to benefit most. As power shifted amidst mourning and suspicion, picture now the silent hush of Jeanne's bridal chamber, the soft rustle of silk, the distant strains of a bridal march halted by tragedy. The princess, expecting to find warmth and camaraderie, instead encountered a death so intimate it felt like a curse. Outside, the palace felt colder, as courtiers exchanged furtive glances and barred their doors against unexpected presence. As your breathing slows and your eyelids grow heavy, imagine Catherine seated alone in her study. The empty velvet gloves draped across her desk. The soft glow of candlelight flickers against her thoughtful face, untroubled by the rumours that swirl above her head. For Catherine, the poisoned gloves were a triumph of discretion. No armies marched, no trumpets blared, and yet her objective was achieved. Terrifying fact 14 thus unveils an episode of courtly subterfuge that transcends the brutality of open warfare. It reminds us that in Catherine's world, even a gift could become an instrument of death, and that the most deadly threats are often hidden in the softest of textures. Let this quiet horror drift through your mind as you drift towards slumber, where the whisper of silk and the echo of betrayal merge into the deep hush of night. As the poisoned gloves drift into memory, to allow your thoughts to slip softly into the next chamber of this somber tale, where family bonds fracture under the weight of power. Now, we come to terrifying fact 15, punishing daughter Margaret, a severance of blood ties. Margaret of Valois, Catherine's third daughter, was celebrated throughout the court for her lively spirit and radiant beauty, yet whispers of a forbidden liaison between Margaret and Dolpelet, a Protestant nobleman, reached Catherine's ears like a summons to judgment. Without a moment's hesitation, Catherine commanded Dolpelet's arrest within the palace walls. He was dragged through echoing corridors, thrust into a hidden cell, and executed quietly in the dead of night, his fate concealed from the princess he had loved. In the cold light of dawn, Catherine stood before her daughter and stripped Margaret of her birthright. The proud princess was divested of her titles and her claim to the throne. She was banished to the distant fortress of Écouen, where crumbling stone walls offered little comfort, and granted only a meagre stipend that barely covered her needs. There, in that lonely exile, Margaret learned the harsh truth of her mother's decree. No blood tie, however sacred, could stand in the way of preserving the dynasty's honour. This merciless act revealed Catherine's iron resolve. She would sacrifice maternal affection to uphold the sanctity of the crown. In a voice devoid of tenderness, she declared, "The realm must stand above loyalty of blood." The punishment of her own child shattered any lingering illusions of Catherine as a gentle mother, exposing instead the Queen's ruthless willingness to sever even her daughter's bond if it threatened her power. Imagine the echo of Margaret's footsteps as she wandered the narrow passages of Écouen, the wind howling like a lament around her shoulders. Each night, she would press her cheek against cold stone and whisper her mother's name in hopes of mercy that would never come. Meanwhile, Catherine carried the weight of her decision in private moments, haunted by her daughter's distant portrait, its eyes accusing her of a cruelty that no crown could justify. Yet this grim family drama also underscores the inexorable logic of power. To Catherine, vulnerability in blood risked undoing a lifetime of political machinations by erasing Margaret's status. She sent a chilling message to nobles and rivals alike in the Queen's court. Even the most sacred of ties could be severed without warning. As your breathing slows and your eyelids grow heavier, picture Catherine alone in her dormitory, the flicker of a single candle casting long shadows on the tapestry. She studies reports of the exile, her expression as calm as marble. She knows the realm's stability demands such heartlessness. Yet, each flash of candlelight reminds her of the daughter she has condemned. Terrifying fact 15 thus unveils the darkest corner of Catherine de Medici's rule, a mother who would consign her own child to obscurity rather than risk a hint of scandal. In this quiet hour, consider the price of power when family devotion is bartered for political security. Let the hush of her lonely fortress and the echo of a severed mother-daughter bond guide you gently towards slumber, where the boundaries between love and duty blur into the soft shadows of night. Although Catherine de Medici's life was defined by tragedy and intrigue, her journey still offers profound values and messages for viewers. Along this path, we witness a woman born between two graves, abandoned and yet experiencing the happiest days in a convent, only to be swept into the brutal whirl of politics. She carried within her the loneliness of an orphan, the despair of a barren woman, the humiliation of being ignored by her husband Henry II, and hidden behind the title of childbearing machine, and finally, the cold cruelty of punishing her own daughter Margaret to protect the throne. From the tragedy of orphaned at birth to married at 14 followed by a decade of infertility, Catherine is far more than a dry historical figure. She stands as an example of relentless will to survive despite drinking mule urine, smearing cow dung, or kneeling before bowls of superstitious potions. She never gave up. When science offered new hope, she listened to Dr. Jean Fernal, and eventually gave birth to Prince Francis, as if by miracle, reaffirming her status and continuing forward with steadfast steps on her path of power. Yet, alongside her resilience, Catherine also paid a staggering price. Power can turn a mother into a ruthless figure, transforming the Queen Mother into the reviled Black Queen. The image of her laughter amid the sea of blood on St. Bartholomew's Day, or the conspiracy of the poisoned gloves, proves that in a ruthless political world, there is no place for maternal love or conscience. From this video, we learn many lessons: the power of will and knowledge. When superstition fails, science and reason become the path to lasting solutions. The value of compassion. Catherine's story reminds us of the importance of empathy and maternal love values, too easily sacrificed when power consumes the heart. A lesson on forgiveness and vigilance. History shows that forgiveness can heal, but can also be exploited as a tool of manipulation. Likewise, being cautious of rumors and public opinion helps us avoid premature judgments of others. Ultimately, Catherine de Medici's life testifies to the endless conflict between sorrow and power, between the longing to be a mother and the thirst for the throne. We emerge from her story with greater compassion, learning to cherish genuine relationships, and understanding that even the most powerful woman of the 16th century had moments of vulnerability and deserved our sympathy.